Good evening, and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Jermaine Jackson, and I will be with your moderator for this evening. We're so glad that you were able to join this discussion during this important time period that we are facing in our nation. Um, Many times we go online and we see what is happening around us, all around us, or sometimes all we need to do is go outside. It's a tough time that we're faced with in our nation. And so today, the Allegheny West Conference is here with you to discuss these matters as a church family, as friends, as brothers and sisters, all under the nation of God, to discuss the matters that are taking place. Today, we have quite a few individuals that are with us, that are joining us, that will discuss this matter. We will introduce each and every one of them here shortly. But we thank you for the opportunity for us to visit with you during this time, to listen in and discuss the matters that we are faced with. Now, just know that as you are listening in at this discussion, that you have every opportunity to join in on the discussion by simply placing a question in the comments section on Facebook, or if you're watching on YouTube, and we will address those questions as best as we can. So thank you again for joining us here this evening. I would like to introduce the various platform members that we have here with us. We have our president, President William T. Cox, the president of the Allegheny West Conference. Pastor Cox, would you introduce yourself?
Well, it is certainly a privilege and a pleasure just to be able to come into your space as we talk about these very important issues. As a conference, we believe that the pain and the anger and the fear that is out there is real. And we look for ways that we can help to validate that, and what are some of the things that we can do that will give us positive outlets. And so we're very happy to be a part of this, and we look forward to what God is going to do in our time together.
Thank you, Elder Cox. We also have quite a number of other guests with us. We have a few pastors that are a part of the Allegheny West Conference, as well as some young individuals. And so we would like to introduce each of them. We have Pastor Ridley, who is currently serves as our youth director of the Allegheny West Conference. Pastor Ridley, would you give a few words?
Yes, greetings, everyone. I'm just excited to be here with you today as we have this very important conversation. I'm really excited because social justice has been a very important part of my ministry. And I'm just so thankful that our conference is taking time out in the midst of everything that's happening and the pain that so many of our people are experiencing, that we're taking this time to dialogue and see what solutions that we can come up with here.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Ridley. We also have Pastor John Coxon.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody, and happy Sabbath to all of you. It's an honor and a privilege to be on this conference today, to be able to talk about social justice issues. I agree with Pastor Ridley and the president. There's so much anger, there's so much hurt, there's so much pain that is going on right now that we all need some time to breathe and really just kind of heal and have a conversation, have a therapy moment with one another. And so I'm really glad to be on here. And I want to thank the president and Jermaine for putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. We also have Pastor Max Gomez.
What's up, everybody, man? It's your boy, Pastor Max Gomez. Glad I could be here with you all today, man. Everybody already said the same thing, man. Just have a real conversation, keep it 100, talk about what's going on in the world, and practically, man, the time to vent, like Pastor John Coach said, time for therapy, man, and for real, man, just a time to evaluate and find out some practical solutions. What can we do here in our cities right now?
All right, Pastor Gomez, thank you for joining us here today as well. And we also have Pastor Nathaniel Drew in the Cleveland, Ohio area.
What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. I certainly wish that we did not have to have conversations like these, but the world is what it is. So I'm grateful that our conference saw it necessary to have this conversation. So look forward to talking a bit with you.
Thank you, Pastor Drew. Now, we also have two individuals that we are pleased to have join in this discussion here today. We have Sister Jasmine Green. Jasmine, are you with us?
Hey. I'm grateful to be, here with everybody and some peers as well, and be able to use this platform. And I'm excited to have this conversation because I want to let people know that it's okay to be a church member and to be a community activist. They don't have to clash. They can go hand in hand.
All right. Thank you, Jasmine, for being with us today. And we also have Josiah Oriorte.
Yes, hello. I'm just very grateful and honored to be here, be able to speak from a young perspective. There's a real issue that goes on, and I'm just very glad that Allegheny West Conference, and I thank all the leaders for allowing me to get on, and hopefully we can have a great conversation on this.
Thank you for joining us. And last but certainly not least at all, we have Sister Carla Valles. We're so pleased for you to join us here today.
Thank you. I want to thank you first, Jermaine, because at the beginning you said you had pastors and young people. And since I'm not a pastor, I'm going to go ahead and put myself in that other category. But I'm on here because honestly, I'm angry as a mother of 3 young Black men. And as somebody that works with countless other young Black men, I want people to know it's okay to be angry. And I'm angry and I'm fed up because things have not really changed in my lifetime. So that's why I'm on here.
All right. We're certainly glad that you were able to join us, and we would definitely get into a lot of these discussions and talking points as we go through. So ladies and gentlemen, you are with us. We will be here at least until 7 o'clock at this evening, discussing quite a few points, valid points that we're all are soul searching and trying to find a way how to cope and deal with the situation that we're currently dealing with at this time. One of the questions that we often get, and I hear and I see it often, and I've been seeing it even today on social media, is where is the church? When we're going through all of this stuff, of course we have the pandemic, we're still dealing with that, but when we're dealing with social injustice, or even on the other side of just being a community who are together, the biggest question that is always out there is, where is the church? Where is the conference even in this situation? And how are we as a church religion organization, playing a vital role in what is going on? So we are here today to talk about that, to talk about not only how we feel personally and what is going on, but what is the church doing about certain aspects of our day and time. So at this point right now, I will just turn it over to our President Cox, to kind of talk a little bit about the idea from a leadership standpoint, the president of the Allegheny West Conference. Where is the conference in all of this right now?
Well, thank you, Jermaine. We are the same place that our members are at. This has been very, very difficult. We are all products of our own experience. And I would say at the outset that our church has not been all that it could be in terms of addressing these issues. We've had challenges in terms of the overall growth in this area, from the top all the way to the last pew in our congregations. And it is a growing process, but it's a misnomer to think that there has not been social activism throughout our church history. I would say that volume 9 of the testimonies, Ellen White's writings on the Southern works, is a indication of the struggle that she had in terms of promoting equality among the races. If you remember, We've gone through a period of slavery. We've gone through a civil war in this country. Individuals that have challenges, even when they come into relationship with God, it can be an ongoing struggle and battle. And that's just a reality. Individuals that have been in the church for years still have some struggles in different areas. This is one of the areas that me personally, I've had difficulty waiting on the church to move as quickly and as efficiently as they could in terms of addressing some of these social ills. We are trying to do better as a conference, to actually get more involved within our community. It is something that we are promoting, that we will not just pray, but we will become active in doing that which will be a blessing to all. I actually spoke on the idea of the Good Samaritan today, when the priest and the Levite did not do what they needed to do. When we look at the model that Jesus has left, that is a model of action. And how can we deal with our feelings and emotions in a positive way? And that's what we are trying to do.
Certainly. It is very important to see those aspects that at this time. And so, Pastor Ridley, I will ask this question to you. At one point in time, you were a pastor before going into the office and being the youth director. You were the pastor of one of our churches, and you were a very strong leader in the community. I will ask you, during times of this magnitude that we're faced with, what are some of the things that you would have done? And where do you see the church playing an active part in the actual community that we are residing in our churches?
Yes. Well, first thing I would say is that if you think about it historically, the Black church has always been the center of our community. Everyone knows that, including politicians. That's why every election cycle, when it's time for, and they're looking for votes or wanting to get reelected, the place they go when they want to reach and connect with Black people is they go to the church. Having said that, I truly believe that we shouldn't just take steps to really be involved, but we should really be the ones that's leading the charge. And that's based upon two things. First of all, as Christians, it models the ministry of Jesus Christ. And secondly, not to mention the fact that if we look at it in light of what's happening now, that we're seeing all of the news, these things are really impacting our communities. And all the more we should be the ones, we really need to be at the forefront of being involved in ministry, in mission, in social justice, as it is really impacting our communities. Some of the things that should be done that I would suggest, and we did, is that we, at my church, we made ourselves available. You see, sometimes we think that, it's going to be too hard to really get involved and be able to make an impact. But sometimes you just got to make yourself available. And so make your building available. Don't just be a church that's open for prayer meeting and Sabbath. But there's so many community meetings. There's so many different things that you can do that if you just make your space available. I mean, I can't even tell you how many ministries and programs and different things that we were able to do that really blessed our community, that didn't cost us anything. All we had to do was we just made our space available. So I would say that I would encourage you to just use your voice to speak out. And I would just encourage you to get involved in your community. And what I simply mean by that is you don't have to be a jack of all trades. Don't try to solve every problem in your community, but find the one or two things that you can address as you assess your community, the one or two things that you can address, and be the best and be known for in your community as the church that can handle and address that situation.
Right. And it's very important for us to be visible in the church. We just don't want to be a church that is on the corner and everyone sees and comes through on the Sabbath or, Wednesday night prayer meeting, but we want to be active in our church, as you stated, and be visible and dealing with those situations that people are dealing with. And so, Pastor Coxum, I want to bring you in on this discussion and ask you a question. As a pastor of a church who have a lot of young individuals of different backgrounds, ethnicities, and diversity is very present. What do you tell that young person that will come to you as a pastor and say, hey, look what's happening to our brothers and sisters around the world, around what's going on? Where is God in all of this? We talk about how God loves us and is here for us and is always present and always. Where is he during these kind of times? Would you speak to that question?
Yeah, Jermaine, that's a very good question. I want to start by saying it's a worthy question. It's an understandable question, and it may be even an appropriate question at this time. And it should not be something that is stifled by any spiritual leader or by church or by any institution. I think even Spirit of Prophecy talks about the fact that, you can't even have faith without the possibility of doubt. And so without limited vision as human beings, sometimes we kind of got to ask that question, like, God, what is happening here? What is going on? We see that in the book of Job, all throughout it. We see that in David's writings, in the Psalms. He's asking questions of God because he cannot see things from God's perspective. But my answer to young adults and to anybody who would ask me is not to be cliche, but to simply say, man, that God is still on the throne. And the fact of the matter is that he is not surprised by anything that is happening. In fact, I would say that his heart is hurt just as much as ours to watch things kind of play out on earth. And one thing that I really go back to in my mind all the time, I love the book of Exodus. And in Exodus chapter 2 and verse 24, the children of Israel have been in slavery for 400 years. And in verse 24, the Bible says they lift up their voice, they call unto God, they pray to him and ask him, God, we can't take this anymore. You got to get us out of this. And the word says in the next verse, man, that God heard them. And some versions say he remembered them, right? But the reality is, man, we know God. God never forgets his people. And if you read like the beginning of the chapter, verses 1 through 23, what you actually find out is that, man, Moses has already been put on the Nile. He's already in Pharaoh's palace. Man, he has already come through there. He's entered into rulership. He has killed a man and he has made his way into Midian. And so he's already in a scenario and in a place where God is about to show him the burning bush, right? And to get him prepared to deliver his people. But by the time the Israelites pray at the end of the chapter, man, 40 years of providence has already taken place. God getting his deliverer ready to get his people out of this mess. So the reason I say that is simply this, is that God is not surprised by anything. And even though we can't see the end of it right now, we can't understand what is happening in the world, man, God knows. And he sees things from his perspective, and he sees much farther than we have. And I am 100% positive that God has a plan, man, to not only restore justice and order to this world, but to also deal with the pain and anger that we feel right now.
Right. Certainly. And so, Pastor Drew, I actually will bring you in on that discussion as well. What are some of the thoughts that you have that you would share with some of the young people as well in facing with, trying to encourage them to let them know that God is still here, that he has not left. He is still around us and he sees and everything that is going on. What are some of the things, as Pastor Coxum also said, what are some of the things that you would share with an individual?
Yeah, I think John did a great job of shedding some light in terms of an answer or response to that question. Nothing we could say would answer it exhaustively, but I think that I would, much like he did, caution individuals to remember Scripture, right? And I think there's a temptation to over glorify the times in which we're living, but I think, and not to lessen the times in which we're living. But I think we can look through Scripture and we can see that pretty much every phase of Earth's history, there was something going on that was catastrophic for people, whether it was oppression, a pandemic-like, situation that was occurring. But one thing that gives me encouragement through that is that regardless of what has been happening and occurring at any stage of human existence that we look at, the common denominator in each stage of life is that we see God. Right. And I think that that's one of the main things that we can hang our hats on. No, it doesn't necessarily make what we're dealing with any easier, but I think that it can help us to just keep in mind the fact that he's been through this before, right? We might not have dealt with situations like this before, but he's been through this. He's been through worse, and that even when we're in situations like this, he's right there with us.
Certainly, and as you stated, God has never left us, and He has promised that He will always be with us, even until the end of the world. And we have to continue to have that faith and that trust that He is with us. He sees, He knows all. He's been there, and will continue to be there for us. But now, Pastor Gomez, I will ask a question of you. How does the traditionally conservative theologian handle these kind of situations when it comes to conservative theology? How would that prevent us from being more socially engaged in the surroundings and the communities and what's going on right now? What do you think about those things?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that our theology and what we understand about God is influenced by our personality on the individual level and our cultural, ethnic backgrounds, where we grew up, as in like what state, what country, and then on the group level, that's where we get it. So for example, in Western Africa, right, in the country of Nigeria, man, there's this old ancient tradition and myth that God formed man out of the ground, and he kept on forming basically a small village, and then told that village to multiply and have babies and have a community, and then stayed with them and interacted with them. Versus there's an old ancient tradition and myth in Western Europe, right, by the Northerners, where they believe that God created man and woman out of a tree and then left them, went up back to heaven, and then he would dictate who would survive based on who would win or lose in battle. In other words, what I'm saying is that many times our theological differences isn't so much theology, it's cultural, right? So this is a perfect example. In the book of Revelation, we find the idea of a beast, right? And the beast represents a nation or a kingdom. And this beast comes up out of the water, right? Comes up out of a multitude of people. And the Bible says that this beast has horns like a lamb. It's lamb-like, but it speaks like a dragon. Now, culturally, we have a Eurocentric understanding of that text, meaning that we understand that this lamb-like beast that speaks like a dragon represents America. And it's lamb-like because it was founded under Christianity or under God, as it says in the Constitution. But because of the Sunday Blue law, right, that's what makes it beast-like. However, as a minority, America has never looked like a lamb. It's never been kind. It's never been meek. It's never been mild. It's always been a dragon to me. So as an African American person, as a Latino person, whatever the case may be, as a minority, America has never looked like a lamb. So I think that, man, we have to understand that at an individual level, my personality helps me shape my theology. But at the group level, right, the values and the traditions that you grew up in as an African American are very different than the values and traditions that I grew up in as a Latino boy. And so I bring these things to the Bible. And so I think it's understanding that, man, we've got to learn to understand at the individual level and group level what we bring to the Word of God, because that's going to help shape our theology and the way we understand Scripture.
Certainly, that's true. And I want to bring in with this discussion right now, Jasmine and Josiah, two young individuals who are very strong in their church, who are actively serving their church, who are not quiet for good purpose. And we appreciate that aspect of the both of you. And as you have heard some of the pastors speak and the role of the church and what the church would do in the community and how we should be more active as two young individuals and listening to your peers and what's going on around you, what are some of the thoughts that you have as how the church, from your eyes, from your viewpoint, can be more active in the community? What can we do? What can we say to be more of a present and an encouraging entity or just community at large?
Well, I feel like the first thing that we need to start doing is going out into the communities, because a lot of people in the communities view church people as, they have this notion as we're higher or better than them. But I feel like we need to humble ourselves down, go into the communities, show that they're loved. Another thing, we need to show unity between the elders and the younger people, because there's no way with our fire, with the young people's fire and the old people's wisdom, that's how we move forward. Because there will be no way if a young person just says, "Oh, we're going to be angry." Y'all saw what happened in Columbus. When we're angry, then everything just is getting messed up right now. But if we had the wisdom of the elders, then we'll have a direct source of where we're going with it. So I feel like unity is a big factor in it.
So I agree with Josiah. I think we definitely need to come together, and I think the church needs to be more of a presence in the community, because if the community doesn't know the church, then that means the church isn't doing a very good job. But I think also inside the church, we need to talk about it with our young people and groom them from a young age to understand what goes on in the community. Like, there's a world outside of church, but there's also a world that connects. Our community and church should connect together. We should know about the things that are happening in society. From the age that parents have to give their kids the talk, they should know there are issues out there that have to do with racism and prejudice, and they should be aware. Like, every time you step outside a set of doors, whether it's your house doors or church doors, there's going to be outside influences from the community and outside influences from people who have malicious intent. And that's a conversation that we need to start in the church. And I feel like it's not had enough.
No, you guys both bring in valid points. How we need to be more of a presence and have that constant communication and start some of these conversations. I remember growing up, and I think we all can attest, where some conversations or some things about life we learned in the church. And so we have to get back to learning about life in the church, learning what's going on around us and having those active communications and conversations about what is going on around us. And so, Sister Carla, I actually want to bring you in, because Jasmine brought up a very good point of reaching our young people at a very early age. And you stated earlier that you have, three young African-American boys and two lovely ladies in your home. Tell us, what do you think from a parent's perspective, what is an appropriate age to talk to them about what is going on in society and to be aware of the race issue?
It's funny, if you had asked me that question before my youngest son was born, I would have said probably about 7, 8, somewhere around there. But when my son was 4 years old, his best friend was a young white boy in his preschool class. And I mean, they did everything together at school. And I remember my son being really excited because this little boy was having a birthday party. And then I went and picked my son up one day from daycare, and he was upset and crying because he couldn't go to Nate's party because his dad told him he didn't want any black kids, that wasn't the word he used, at his party. And so it was hard for me as a parent because I didn't realize I was going to have to address the race issue with my child at 4 years old. And it was a difficult conversation to have, because how do you make a 4-year-old understand that the problem is not them? And how do you make them grow up not being ashamed of the color of their skin? With me, it's more at a young age, you start instilling in them being proud of who they are, being black, how beautiful your black skin is, how God made you that for a reason. You find books that have to do with black children because they're not going to get that in school. And it doesn't matter whether you send them to a white school or a black school, it's just not taught. And when it is, it's only in February. So you also have to teach them that they're to be proud of being black all year round, not just the shortest, coldest month of the year. So that's where it has to start before you even start, before you even have to address the fact that other people are going to look at you differently. I had to make sure that they looked at themselves in the brightest light possible. I grew up with my mother telling me things like, okay, if you go in the store with your white friends, you make sure you stay near them. Don't wander off by yourself. Because if something happens, they're always going to come after you. And I thought my mom was ridiculously paranoid until I had children. And now it's, if you go in someplace and there's an elevator and that elevator opens and there's only a white woman in that elevator, you wait for the next elevator. I don't care how much, it's little things like that. Be aware of your surroundings. When you're going through a town and you don't see anybody of color driving through that town, I don't care how hungry you are, how much you have to go to the bathroom, you keep driving. Right. So, in answer to your question, you have that conversation as young as they can possibly have it, but you start instilling the pride of who they are as Black children at birth. I started seeing Black folks at birth, playing Black music at birth. We watch, and sometimes my kids, I think, get tired of me talking about so much Black this and Black that, but my pro-Blackness is not anti-whiteness. It's just making sure that my children are comfortable and proud in their own skin. And my kids have faced things, even in elementary school, where they were able to stand up for themselves and not take what was being thrown at them because they had that pride in themselves.
No, and it's certainly important to understand who we are. Like you said, it's something, from birth. We have to understand the color of our skin and understand what we look like and what society view us in that light. And so to have that conversation as early as possible, I would also agree is very important. Certainly with my own kids, I'm doing the exact same thing and having that conversation with them to understand who they are as they grow up. And so I actually want to bring Elder Cox and Sister Valles along on this conversation for this next question. With the both of you all having adult boys and girls, men and women, adult children, I would ask this question. We understand that in society, we want to say that there is equality between male and female. Unfortunately, in this circumstance, we have faced the fact that, unfortunately, Black men are viewed a little different than our Black young ladies. And so I would ask both of you this question of what does that conversation look like, and how do you address that with your young sons versus your young daughters? Elder Cox, I'll start with you, and then Sister Valles.
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question because what has helped me in terms of addressing these issues with my kids is just a level of honesty and openness, and actually teaching them how to forgive. Now, that may sound strange, but things are going to happen in life that there is no rhyme or reason for. People are going to dislike you, no fault of your own. And if you hold that animosity in your heart towards them, or if you don't equip them with information that will help to guard them from being blindsided, then they're at greater danger. And so it is inevitable. It is inevitable that disappointment will occur in this life. And so what I've sought to do is to try and teach my kids the truth about the circumstances that we're living in, and then equip them with a process of understanding how to go about forgiveness.
I think with me, I agree completely with what Elder Cox said, but even more so with my daughters, it's huge to me that they do not tear a Black man down, that they do not look down at Black men. Society does enough of that without Black women degrading and putting them down. So that is extremely important to me, that they do what they can to lift, Black men up. They also realize, my children realize that as a Black woman, I can get away with and say things that a Black man can't. I'm very vocal. I'm very bold. Sometimes my personality is over the top, and I know that. And take it or leave it. This is me. But I would be less of a woman, less of an African American, less of a pastor's wife, less of a mother if I didn't speak up or use a platform to the best of my ability to lift up my Black brothers. As far as my sons, Jermaine, there's not a day that I'm not terrified.
No.
There's not a day that I don't pray for them. My son works in Chicago. He runs a nonprofit there called Chicago Votes. And he gets invited places to speak. And he was speaking at one of our white Ivy League schools. And after he finished speaking, he changed and put on his jogging suit, was jogging, and saw the police had a young Black man pulled over on the side. And he stopped and said, "Hey, what did he do? What are you doing?" As a mother, that would have terrified me. I didn't find out that happened until 2 years later. But it's a catch-22. You raise your children to stand up for injustice, but then you have that fear that one day when you stand up, is it going to cost you your life? He ended up being handcuffed. When one of the professors from the school came out and asked, "Hey, what are you doing? He's our speaker." They were surprised because, of course, now he was in a sweatsuit and he wasn't looking the way they expected him to look. So, you do the best you can. My goal for my children is come home alive. If we have to address it later, then let's address it later, but come home alive. But yeah, with my girls, I just want them to be positive. I want them to be vocal. I want them to stand up for the underdog. And I want them in everything they do to support young Black men in a positive way with their words. Nothing wrong with correcting them in private, but my girls will not be anybody that tears our men down. There's enough of that.
No, that's powerful in what you just stated, and we appreciate that. It's very unfortunate, and given the story of your son, that it doesn't matter who you are and the education that you have. It's about how you look and the way you look, and those are things that we will continue to talk about here. We have quite a few questions. We're getting questions from Facebook and on YouTube that we will bring up here shortly and start addressing some of those. But that brings a very powerful point. And actually, Josiah, I do want to ask you a question in particular. When you look at the young man who just was recently pulled over by the police for apparently running a stop sign, and he was scared and and drove to his grandmother's house, complied with the officers, got out, hands up, even laid face first onto the ground. But you heard him crying, you heard him pleading, "Please don't shoot, I'm scared." Even his grandmother is coming out. I will be honest with you and tell you that I can see you. I can see you being that young man who we all know you're a positive influence in your school, a positive influence in your church and your community, around your peers. You are a positive individual collectively. But individuals outside may not know that about you. All they do is see your face, your skin color, and automatically address you in a certain manner. If you were to put yourself in that same position, would you feel? Kind of bring us to your thoughts in being in a situation, seeing that young man and knowing that could simply be you.
Man, when you see situations like what is going on, it's like, it just hits me in my heart. Just like you said, you can see me, I can see my brother being pinned down to the ground. I can see the kids that I work with being pinned down to the ground. And honestly, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm very angry. I'm very upset about all the situations that are going on. I'm very upset that white armed kids can go up in schools and kill 9, 17 people. They can walk into churches and they are peacefully arrested and taken to a mental hospital. But even with this situation, these cops aren't getting charged. They get to go back home to their families. it really it strikes me in my heart knowing that as an unarmed Black man, I'm in school, I'm in college, they just look at me as a thug. And it brings anger in my heart. And it makes me feel really sad and emotional knowing that could be any of us. That could be any of us. And I just pray to God every day when I walk out the house, and I refuse to live in fear. I really do. I'm not afraid of a cop, but I'm cautious. I will never be afraid. My parents were just having a conversation like, there's a lot of cops in this area. Are you sure we should go walking today? I'm like, Mom and Dad, I know we have to be careful, but living in fear is not going to do anybody justice, because that is what they want us to do. So to sum it up, I'm very angry about the situation. But at the same time, I'm not going to live in fear. I'm going to be as cautious as possible.
No, that's admirable of you. That's the interesting thing, is that it's hard for us to live life in fear because we have to live our lives. I mean, even with the pandemic, of course, we're being extra cautious and we're putting on masks and we're doing all of this stuff so that we don't catch a virus. But unfortunately, we live and breathe being Black. And it's so important for us to be comfortable in that and not live in fear, but being very cautious, as you stated. And so I certainly appreciate your assessment and your thoughts and views on that, because it's important for us to all understand not to live in fear, but to be careful and to understand your surroundings and know your surroundings and know where you're going and what you're doing. And unfortunately, that's the life that we have to live. So we definitely appreciate that perspective on that. I want to bring in Pastor Coaxum and Pastor Drew actually on this question. As young African-American men, you guys are pastors. This is your job. This is what you do. You do this on a day-to-day basis. You're in your churches on the Sabbath and maybe Wednesday night prayer meeting, or whenever you're in there. So you have on a suit, you have on a tie, you have on whatever, because that is your profession. That is what you do. However, you don't look like that every single day. And you actually go out and you both are in physical fitness, and you're in the gyms and you go out jogging. Seeing this happen to Aubrey, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, does that change now your perspective on how you personally appear in public and what to wear, what not to wear, what to do, how to do it, to jog? Share some thoughts on just knowing that what you normally do on an everyday basis, on a normal basis, has now been scrutinized and you have to be careful.
So I think I'll echo the sentiments of Josiah. I try my best not to be in a state where I'm living in fear, but I would also be lying if I didn't say that it gets scary sometimes. Just thinking about Christian Cooper, who was the Black man accused by the white woman, Amy Cooper. He's a Harvard grad and, educated person, has got a lot of awards, done a lot of great things. So even for me, I don't live 24/7, 7 days a week with a suit and tie on, ready to preach a sermon. Most of the time I look like this, sweats and shorts and things like that. And the interesting thing is, and I almost feel shame sometimes by doing it. But when I walk into stores, when I'm walking down the street and I'm passing a cop, I actually try to make myself look less threatening, right? Because I just already have my mindset at baseline. I'm seen as a threat. So I make sure that I'm smiling more than usual. I make sure that I'm visible in stores, so it doesn't even give the appearance that I'm trying to steal something. Sometimes I shy away from putting my hood on, or I just try to make myself look as least threatening as possible. I haven't been pulled over a lot by cops, but a couple of times I have been. I literally document every move I'm about to make before I make it, just to make sure that he or she does not mistake my movement as a threat. My mom actually instilled that in us when we were growing up. So if I'm reaching for my license or registration, if I'm going to scratch the back of my head, my gut reaction is not to expect that I can do that. My gut reaction is, let me ask for permission to scratch the back of my head so it doesn't look like I'm reaching for a weapon. And I think that's a terrible way to have to live, and to know that the character you have does not matter at face value. Your education doesn't matter at face value. The good that you've done, if you're a family man, a good husband, a good father, like none of that matters at face value. You're seen as a threat. And when your skin color is seen as a threat, you know there's very little that you can do to erase that. But you still try to do as much as you can. And that is a scary way and a sad way to live.
Yeah, I want to echo everything that Pastor Drew said. And I'll just say this, man, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to try to appease, you know, what we perceive to be the majority class of people and try to make them feel more comfortable, or people in the world in general, to make them feel more comfortable about my blackness. As Pastor Drew said, I don't wear a suit 24/7, but I mean, I'm a pastor. I'm like, dude, I'm supposed to be one of the good guys, right? I have a degree. I've been educated. What more do I have to do to receive worth and value from everybody else in the world? Why does my skin color somehow erase and obliterate everything else about me personality wise and all the education and things that I have done and how good of a person I am? But to your question, Jermaine, you know, I'm not sure that it changes the way that I behave, but it does cause me to second guess myself constantly. Just the other day, I was like, you know what, for the first time in a long time, I'm gonna go out for a walk. I'm gonna take my 4-month-old daughter and I'm gonna walk around my neighborhood and just get some exercise. And I literally second guessed myself to say, should I do this today? Now, why in the world should I have to think like that as a human being, a child of God, and an American citizen? It's absurd that I have to think that way. But that's the way that our society, that's where we have come to in the world today. And so it's scary, it's exhausting. And I'll say even one more thing, man. You know, growing up, I came from South Carolina, and you know, I can tell you, racism is alive and well there, just as it is anywhere else in the country. And man, you know, there's something subconscious that I think that happens in Black people from time to time because we are scared and we are exhausted. And that's called code switching, right? Which is basically like you talk one way around your Black friends, but then when you get around a certain sea of different ethnic groups, sometimes it's not even on purpose. It's not intentional, but you kind of subconsciously code switch your language so you won't seem more threatening, or in a sense, you won't seem so Black. And at the end of the day, that's a horrible thing for anybody to have to deal with 24/7, 365. I just want to be myself, who God called me to be, and live my life. And it's obvious from the state of the world that maybe I can't do that right now.
Oh, that's very true. No. That is very true. Sister Valles, Carlin, you want to make a comment about this as well?
Something John said just triggered in me, and I was saying I do a live video every morning, and one of the things I was saying is I have a white voice. It's a voice I use if I want to go look at a house. It's a voice I use if I'm interested in looking at a car. It's a voice I use if I need a job. And at this age now, it becomes comical to me to use the voice and then see the look on their face when I walk up. But it is something that we're very much trained to do. And we've been taught that my sounding Black is not acceptable. And in order for me to get over, I have to conform to what you expect me to be. And it sucks because you're living between these two cultures. You know, I can sound that, and I grew up in a world, and I know Jasmine had this issue too, because we talk about it. If I talk properly and educated, I'm accused of sounding white. And things like that are things that we deal with constantly, because I grew up around a lot of white kids. I've had people say, "Oh, you're cool for one of them." Like, what does that even mean?
Wow.
And you know, you grow up and you listen to these things and you're thinking, okay, and you kind of just brush it off, and eventually you're like, enough is enough. This is me. This is what you get in all my Black glory. And it's acceptable. And guess what? I am extremely educated. I don't care how proper you talk. I can talk just as properly. I don't care what you bring at me. I can bring it right back at you. It's little things like I'm intense, but instead of me being assertive, which a white woman would be, I'm aggressive because of the color of my skin. The labeling is very different. And so, you know, yes, it sucks for Black men to have to go through that. But as Black women too, we are treated like you're aggressive. You must be angry. You must be, no, I'm just loud. That's just me.
Right.
So yeah, that when John said that, it kind of triggered that in me. Like, yeah, that white voice is something that I do own.
No, it's very true. It's very true. And I think a lot of us grew up in that mindset that you have to be able to switch on and off. And Jasmine, I bring you in on this quick tidbit. You and I were both talking. We're from the same area. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and you also live there as well. We shared a few stories talking about just the culture and the aspects and just living in everyday racism. What happened to Ferguson, unfortunately, was something that the world saw at that time, but this is something that we grew up in every single day, from school to walking, wherever, whatever, being followed in the restaurant or a mall or anything like that. But talking, if you ever lived in St. Louis or know people from St. Louis, there's a certain accent that they have. And I know I had it very bad. And I still have it whenever I go back home and I talk to my friends. It's easy to just get back into that mentality and talk that way. But you have to be able to switch it on and off because of the way you are treated. Share a little bit about your personal feelings and viewpoints and just growing up around that same kind of aspect and that mentality that you have to be able to switch back and forth, even because of just where you live and who you are around.
Yeah, so I lived in St. Louis for my high school years, and it was actually the first time I experienced racism in such a bold way. Code switching was my life. It was the only way that I was able to survive. I went to a predominantly white high school, and I guess just to explain for people who don't understand, in St. Louis, they have a program called the VIC program, where they bus inner city kids into the county schools. And so all the African American students at predominantly white schools are from the city. I wasn't. So I was even more of an outcast, being nicknamed the county brownie. So I kind of experienced racism from both sides of the fence when I lived in St. Louis, and there's no hiding it there. The Black kids knew that I wasn't one of them. And even the white kids were intimidated by me, didn't know if they can trust me. I even had teachers / coaches who would just call me Black girl because they didn't want to bother to learn my name. So living in St. Louis was very tough. My high school years were absolutely horrible. And my freshman year was the roughest because I was brand new and I didn't know how things worked there. So just in order to survive the next 3 years, yeah, code switching was like a second language to me. I had to learn to be friendly and not threatening to the white kids. And I had to learn to get involved in their activities and learn how they operate. And then I had to, let my Black friends know that, I'm still Black. I'm one of you guys. Just because I live in a different zip code doesn't make me more educated, doesn't make me more snobbish. So it was a rough 4 years. Like, I really couldn't wait to get out. It was hard.
Right. No, I definitely understand that. You and I both have lived that. And, I lived there for a while and had to deal with the same thing. I lived in a county where it was predominantly white, but a lot of Blacks were bused into the school system. And, you had to deal with that other aspect, unfortunately, of being Black, but others considering you something different because you don't talk it or you don't act it or you don't live and grow up in the same aspect. So unfortunately, we do have certain situations that we have to deal with. But I think I want to bring in Elder Cox. He has a thought about this as well. And I would like for you to share that thought on that.
Yes, well, thank you. What I would say to you guys, what you were talking about, how you change to suit every situation, the term would be emotional intelligence, knowing your surroundings, knowing your situation, and acting accordingly to it for your own benefit. Should you have to do it? No, but it is a blessing that you are intelligent enough to do it.
That's certainly correct. Appreciate your comments and feedback on all of these, guys. I want to switch to a question that is coming from Facebook from Casey Nosil. The question, and I will ask this question to Pastor Ridley. Why aren't we seen as equal? Why do we always have to prove our humanity? Pastor Ridley, could you give some comments to that question?
Oh, wow. Why aren't we seen as equal?
Why aren't we seen as equal, and why do we always have to prove our humanity?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say, in particularly, if we talking about in this country, and you look at this quote unquote America, which is called a capitalistic society. If you look at just the history of this country alone, Europeans stole this land from the natives, and then this land was developed on the back of stolen Africans. And so this whole system of capitalism where everyone can just build themselves up and has a real future and chance to really succeed is really built on the premise in this country that their success and prosperity is dependent upon someone else's struggle and pain and suppression. And so from that standpoint, it's built into the very fragment of this country that we're living in, so that the dominant society or those who are in control have used it to justify their ability to now control everything that's here, run everything here, have this so-called capitalistic country or system where they're on top and everyone else is less. I mean, it's even written in the Constitution that Black and brown people are 3/5 human. The slaves, they were 3/5 human. So, but it all starts, I would say, on that premise of the foundation of America, that in this capitalistic society, that in order for them to be the dominant and control and run everything and prosper, it's dependent upon someone else being less than. So
Wow. Max, want to bring you in. You have a comment concerning this question as well.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Ridley said. And when you look through our history, any group, any majority that tried to have power over the minority, for example, the Nazis told the Germans that Jews were rats, right? Here in this country, man, Europeans began to tell Americans, right, that African Americans were apes, right? They began to tell the people that, hey, they can take more pain. They began to tell the people they have superhuman strength. They began to tell the people, for example, Black mothers don't really have hearts like we do. That's why when we rip them away from their children, they don't really feel it. In other words, if you can objectify and thingify the person, then the person in the eyes of the majority is no longer a person. So all of a sudden, and you don't quote me on this, but there have been several case studies, man, of police officers, right? A test that they've done on police officers, right, where they've put, for example, a young Black boy and a young Black girl and a young white boy and a young white girl, and they've asked the police officers, hey, can you guess, just guess what age these children are? And the case studies have found out that almost 9 times out of 10, y'all, almost 9 times out of 10, the police officers would add 5 years of life to the African-American children or to the Black children versus the white children. So in other words, right, as a police officer, the level of force and authority that you treat a 20-year-old Black man is different than you would treat a 15-year-old Black boy. But if I see a Black boy and to me, he looks like a Black man, in other words, we look so much for like blatant racism, like, you know, the slur of the words and the racial terms and the blatant, you know, killing. But man, we are missing half the battle by just focusing on the blatant racism. When truly we told, man, we have got to focus on the dehumanizing that we don't see on an everyday level, that happens on an everyday life. For example, man, case studies of preschool teachers who were asked, I want you to look at a classroom of kids and notice any bad behavior. And because of the technology that we had, they were able to detect that the eyes immediately went to the Black kids. And as they say, if you look for something, you're gonna find something. Just think about how horrible that is. The sweetest people on earth should be preschool teachers. And yet immediately when they're looking for bad behavior, their eyes goes directly to a 4 or 5-year-old Black boy. That's dehumanizing. So I think for us, man, why to Casey's point, man, why do we have to, you know, keep on proving ourselves, or why is that in the third? Man, it's been built, like Ridley said, man, it's been systematic. We have got to teach people. You automatically begin to dehumanize us from the moment you look at African Americans.
No, I appreciate that comment. And that's very, very, both of you guys bringing out very relevant points to this. I want to bring in Pastor Drew into this conversation with your mental health background and your education involved in this. One of the things that Pastor Gomez just recently said is something that I can personally speak to, being in 6th grade, growing up and being in 6th grade when personal story is, you know, at the school that I was at the time, teachers brought me into a room. I'm in 6th grade by myself. No parents, didn't even call my parents, didn't even tell anybody else. They brought me into a circle. They put my seat into a circle. And I think it was about 6 white teachers were surrounding that circle. And they started pouring into me negativity, telling me what I can't do. And I remember specifically, one teacher told me specifically, he said to me, Jermaine, you are, by the age of 18, 3 things are going to happen to you, or this is going to be your story by the age of 18. Either A, you're going to be dead, or number 2, you're going to be in jail, or number 3, you're going to have a bunch of babies. Why? Because you can't do anything. You are nobody. And this is what they were telling me as a young African-American 6th grader, who at that time, I must say, had the best grades in the class, was top of the class, was doing all kinds of successful things, but yet they kept pouring negativity into me, hoping that one day I would be exactly what they stated I would be. Share with us, when you were pouring into individuals, one of the things that you hear all the time is telling someone that they can versus they can't do. From a mental health perspective, or even from a background of that nature, tell us the difference with that of I can't versus I can in your mind.
Yes, I think it is, largely a mentality thing. Ridley and Max were speaking about how, the ideals of Blacks as less than was built into the crevices of this country. And so the question becomes, okay, it was built on the backs of slaves who, they were made to think that way, but how is that still sustained in 2020? And I think from a mental standpoint, it takes programming and reprogramming. I was looking at a YouTube video of a group of young kids, maybe between ages of 3 to 5 years old, Black ones, white ones, just, young kids. And they were shown a Black baby doll and a white baby doll. And they were each asked the same question: which out of the 2 baby dolls are the nice baby dolls? And each one of them, the Black girls, the Black boys, the white girls, the white boys, they all pointed to the white baby doll as the nice baby doll. And they all pointed to the Black baby doll as the mean one. You can look at things like diseases that we've seen in this world. One was called the Black Plague. You can think about even one of the most historic movie franchises in all of history, Star Wars, and and the evil person, the bad person with Darth Vader that was in all Black. White is normally associated with life, while Black is associated with death. While many of us even still wear all Black to funerals, right? Because we just associated with that. And so we've been programmed and reprogrammed to see ourselves as less than. And the reality is that if they can program us in a way to think less of ourselves, then that's half the battle. They really have taken the fight out of our hands, and they don't really have to say much. They've demonized Blackness so much that for many of us, we don't even recognize it, but we start to see ourselves as less than. So we go through entire educational systems. Many of us have, from preschool to high school, never seeing one Black person do anything positive, not knowing the history of Black people, the inventions that we've done, but we learn about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and everybody else, but we never see Blackness as celebrated. We see it as an afterthought or not important. And so that reprogramming causes us to see ourselves as less than. No, very true. Very true. Sister Carla, I want to bring you in on this as well. I know you speak to a lot of young people and a lot of different groups in diversity and education and things of this nature. I also want to bring you in then on this comment as well.
One of the things that we tend to lack in the African-American community, unfortunately, is our history. When Europeans went to Africa, there were parts of Africa they went into, and they saw kings, and they saw gold, and they saw ivory. But what they also saw is a democratic system that was already set up, a monetary system that was already set up, a governmental system that was set up and advanced more than anything that Europeans or obviously Americans had done. So what they did was made sure that they took certain people from different tribes. So first of all, they couldn't communicate with each other because they didn't speak the same languages. The second thing they did is they began to tear down the family. The pastors addressed that by saying, well, Black mothers don't care about their kids and this and that. If you attack the family, you've attacked the whole system. So then that leads into us believing that we're not good enough. So then within the Black community, you have Black Islanders that don't like Black Americans, that don't like Black Africans, that don't. And so we begin to implode on ourselves. So as somebody looking out, if I want to bring you down, I can then turn around. If I turn you on yourself, you've done my fighting for me. And it has been repeatedly done. And we've bought into it, and we've decided to believe the lie. We have not taught our children that they come from kings and queens, not just because we're children of God, but in Africa, they were so advanced. Right. Okay, I'm going to tell you, I'm a huge Marvel fan. So when Black Panther came out, and I was like, it is about time somebody shows where we were at before we were brought here. The fact that we don't think about the fact that we were brought here because they were too weak to build this country on their own. They tried to get the Indians to be their slaves, and they couldn't handle it. So not only were we superior intelligently, but we had more intelligence, we had more strength, we had all of that. Now, if we want to get that back, then we have to come together as a group. We have to stop tearing each other down. We have to stop buying into the white narrative that we are not good. We have to stop believing that once we make it big, that we have to be white. We've got to stop believing. We have to stop acting like if you're light, you're better than your dark skin. So we have to stop acting like if you straighten your hair, you're better than those of us that have our hair natural. We have to stop, forget what white people think of me. We have to stop worrying about what white people think of Black people and start concentrating on building each other up so we can be strong enough that regardless of what the outside throws at us, I can brush it right off like it didn't even touch me. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little, but this is really, I'm really passionate about this. I do work with a lot of young, my first job is I work with kids with special needs. My second job is I work with at-risk teens. And these kids are repeating these cycles that have been drilled into them. Even their own family will tell them, well, you're not smart enough for college. Stop that foolishness. Because until we believe in ourselves, it won't matter what any white person can come up to me and tell me I'm great, and I'm not going to believe them if I don't believe it myself. And we need to start teaching our young people. And I'm telling you where it starts. I'm going to shut up in a minute. I'm going to tell you where it starts. We need to bridge the gap between our young and our old. Part of the reason the civil rights movement worked is because all ages were working together. We now live in a faction society. In our churches, the young people are off on their own. We are not trying to learn from each other. We're not trying to learn from our elders. When we have potlucks at my church, do you know who I sit with? The 70 and 80-year-old women, because they're much wiser than I am, and I learn a lot from them. And then I get up from them and I sit with the teenagers because they're a lot wiser and streetwise than I am, and I learn a lot from them. And when we come together, what a powerful force we will be. So let's stop worrying about how white people look at us and work on how we look at ourselves. All right, I'm done. Sorry.
Yes, indeed. I would like to just jump up and shout the comments that have just been made are right on point. It's an interesting thing. There's an old African proverb that says, until the lion develops his own printing press, the story of the hunt will only be told from the hunter's perspective. And that's the challenge that we have. There is a process of indoctrination that has come. I don't know how many have read the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Basically, what happens is whoever is in power last gets to write the history. And so as an example, we are no longer in slavery, but for so many of us, we are still in bondage. And the difference between slavery and bondage is slavery has shackles on our hands and our feet, where bondage has shackles on our minds. How do we think? How do we respond? I have individuals that people of color, and I know I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but here is the issue. Individuals will say regional conferences, as an example, are not legitimate. Well, who told you that? Why is it that you feel your worth can only be identified if you are connected to the larger group? I was talking to some individuals. Now, there's a pastor in one of our conferences that looked just like us that made the statement that you can't get to heaven in a regional conference. That's what he said. It's unbelievable, okay? And so this is what I would say to all of you that are listening. You tell me what is worse, a person who doesn't know their history or a person who knows their history and it doesn't make a difference. When God has blessed us with intelligence, when he has blessed us to become educated, when he has blessed us to be financially stable, and we are actually able to do something to give back to our people, we choose to go in a different direction. Now, maybe that's what God has called you to do. I would just say that the demoniac, after Jesus released him from the legions that was in him, he pled with Jesus, let me follow you wherever you go. And Jesus says, no, you need to go back home, and because you have too good a story to tell. And I'm saying that how much more would we be able to meet the needs of our kids that are now growing up if they were educated to our history? Because until we develop our own printing press, whoever's last in power gets to write it. And we become subservient to a history that is not accurate, dare I say, truth. We have a president now that refers to alternative facts. Well, there are no alternative facts. If it's true, it's true. If it's a lie, it's a lie.
No, that's very true. And actually, you bring up another question, and we have some other questions that are coming in. And because of time, I'm going to try to pull some of these questions together. But President Cox, I want to keep you on for a question here. As you were talking about the regional conferences and the churches and things of that nature, we have all heard different perspectives and mindsets and thoughts about it. And we should be as one and things of that nature. And you started to kind of talk about it, but just more poignant, I want to ask you a direct question to just say, do you think that at this point in time that our churches, our Black churches, our regional conference are in danger of being seen as irrelevant? If they are, what can we do to make a difference? If they aren't, then how can we continue to be impactful and powerful in our communities?
Well, what makes us relevant is that we are meeting needs of society. We had a theme, and we continue to wear that theme on our collars. If you've seen us with little badges on our coats, we talk about ministry beyond the walls. The challenge that we have is that we are still of the mindset that church only takes place inside of four walls. So while we are not having church because of the pandemic that is taking place, individuals are feeling very empty and feeling as if the church is not really involved in what's going on in their lives, when in reality, we are the church. We carry the church everywhere we go. Paul said it like this, know ye not that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. So what we do, how we are reflective of God's presence in our lives is literally the church. Those pastors that have become community oriented. All right. Now, I need to give a caveat to that. OK, when I say community oriented, I'm not talking about building your own brand. I'm talking about building up the fellowship of God so that because we move around, a church should not just be dependent upon who their leader is. It ought to be a mindset of the people that are going to be there that will move, as Pastor Ridley stated, in a specific direction. And that's how churches develop history in a local setting. It's not just based upon the pastor who is there at that time. Pastors are going to come and go, and they're going to bring different gifts to the table. But the question becomes, does that church in that local location, does it create an image within the community that now encourages individuals to say, well, the Ephesus Seventh-day Adventist Church is a place where needs can be met. The Fruit of the Spirit Seventh-day Adventist Church, the Beacon of Hope, the Temple of Praise, and you go down the line. Because if it's just about who the pastor is, then when that pastor leaves, what happens to the history of that church? And so it's ministry beyond the walls on an individual basis. When I leave out of my house, when I'm in the community, am I being reflective of the character of Christ that helps individuals recognize that, hey, there's something different about this individual. I want to know what the difference is. And that's how churches grow. That's how relevance becomes stable in terms of what we are seeking to do as a conference, as a fellowship.
No, that's a very great point. Very great point. And we actually, leading into that question, that comment, we have a question on Facebook from Josita, and Pastor Ridley and to Pastor Coaxum, I'll ask this question of you to address. And let me give a little backdrop for it. Once I read the question, is how can state and regional conferences work together to address some of these issues that we're faced with? And the backdrop is just so that everyone can understand the differences between regional conferences and state conferences. As President Cox has stated a bit about what regional conferences are, it's really the makeup, and I'm shortening this. This is the makeup of minority groups working at churches and individuals working together, and that spreads all across the North America division and so forth. Whereas state conferences have been seen to be more of our white brothers and Caucasian brothers and sisters and things of that nature. However, that has evolved over time. Now, this is the way that it began in the past due to the history and the state we were living in, with the cultural differences and so forth. And over time, it has kind of evolved into where now you see more of our brothers and sisters that look like us are involved in the state conferences. And that's where some of the question comes in as to why do we still need regional conferences and so forth. So getting back to the question at hand is if there is a way, how can state conferences and regional conferences, or even churches that may be, 2 blocks away from each other, 3 miles away from each other, how can the two work together during times like this?
Yeah, so I would just say that, well, I mean, and you kind of, Jermaine, just touched on it a little bit, and I would just add to it the fact that they are only, you mentioned the fact that how there are a lot of people now in state conferences look just like us. And so the first thing that needs to take place is that, like here in Columbus, we have churches that belong to state conference. We have churches that belong, of course, to our conference, Allegheny West, but to recognize, because most of the members now look like us in many of those churches, that the issues and needs, there's a commonality there. We can all relate to when you see what just happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd. We should all be angry. Anyone who looks like everyone, all humanity should be angry, but especially people like us. And when you look at the fact that a lot of these issues are impacting our community, that in of itself, you would think should be the drawing bridge, because we are all, at the end of the day, and particularly here in a lot of places in the Midwest and on the East Coast, if we're honest today, majority of the members look like us. What the only thing that makes them still almost state conferences is their leadership just looks different, even though their members look like us. So that commonality, you would think, should be the drawing bridge. But I think the biggest hindrance, though, is where we need to really come together and have conversation. And that's why I'm so happy with what we're doing now, is because it's the fact that we need to come together and say that we're going to make this work a priority in our conferences, in our churches. And I think that is the biggest holdback, is that we have not really yet made the commitment that we're going to make these kind of ministries, this kind of work, being involved in community and outreach and justice, for many of our conferences and churches have not made it a priority. And for me, that's the biggest thing that is holding us back right now.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and I'll just keep it really brief. I think we need leaders of state conference churches and regional conference churches to come to the table, but especially state conference churches, and to ask, especially in times like these, where it doesn't seem that Black lives actually matter. We need those leaders from those conferences to come to us and ask, how can I help? What can I do to help you in this cause, to help us? Because this is all of our fight as being a part of the collective fabric of humanity. How can I help you? How can I support you and undergird you? Whatever you need me to do, I want to do that. And then secondly, I'll just say this, especially because the preaching moment at the 11 o'clock divine hour on Sabbath is an extremely powerful moment. And it is an influential moment for a lot of people in the church. And I think that we need more people to be preaching sermons and messages to take time during that powerful, influential moment to talk about social issues and to not be afraid of bringing these things up. As Jason has said, and that Jermaine, you said just a minute ago, many of our state conference churches have a lot of people of color in them. It would be helpful if they would take time to talk about these issues instead of shying away from them for fear of offending people who are a part of their church or whoever is in leadership. This is not just a Black issue. This is a humanity issue. It is an American issue. It's a Christian issue that needs to be addressed within the walls of the church and without the walls of the church.
Well, I certainly agree with that. And again, I think we go back to the idea of miseducation. Regional conferences has been identified primarily as Black conferences when, in essence, the term regional means multiple states or locations. You have state conferences that are actually regional conferences, such as Arkansas, Louisiana, because it covers multiple states. That's a clearer definition of what a regional conference is. When individuals start talking about we don't need more regional conferences, the question that needs to be asked is this really the best use of our finances? Every state conference has a president, a secretary, a treasurer. It may have its own schools. It has its own conference office. And so you have all of these state conferences. Why aren't they coming together and becoming more regional conferences, which would give more resources? It would give greater opportunity for growth. The same thing happens even within our churches. We have multiple churches within a city, and when it's time to do evangelism, smaller churches don't have the same kind of resources, but because we can't come together many times because of how the smaller churches got started, because they got upset with something that occurred in quote unquote the mother church. This idea of division is not of the Lord. And yet, what model would you want to follow if you were to come together and say, let's do what is going to be the best use for our growth and development? Nobody says, well, we want to close down state conferences. They always go to closing down regional conferences, where regional conferences has had, and it is validated by statistics, 16% greater, 16 times the growth of state conferences. So again, it's a miseducation of the facts that are out there and the relevance in reference to what our conferences are doing.
No, that's very true. And you actually bring a very big point is I think we as a regional conference have to do a better job at education. And I know that is something that we have all discussed and talked about. And especially during these times, I think it's that much more important for us to get the information out there and to provide that education on our reason, on our purpose and our goals. And not only to provide the education, but allow people to see in action what we stand for, what we are all about. And it's more than just, just separation because of a church. There's a lot of reasoning behind that, not just from a Black standpoint, but from a minority standpoint, for a Hispanic standpoint, from different cultural standpoint. We are very relevant. And it is very important for us to continue to be relevant in these kind of specific times. And I think it's important for us to continue to show our relevancy during these times. So, Elder Cox and everyone, thank you for addressing that question, because I think it is very important and powerful for us to provide the answer and to not only speak it, but to show it. And so thank you guys for that question. Our time is fleeting, and we have quite a few questions that are coming in and a couple of other questions that we need to address. So I'm going to come to start speeding this up just a little bit. So hopefully you guys can shorten your answers just a little. But again, we want to try to get in as much as we can in the short amount of time. So Pastor Drew, I want to bring you in on this very next question. You hear this term, Black Lives Matter. You hear this often. And I think sometimes people may not truly understand what Black Lives Matters. When people say or have the t-shirts on and whatever the case may be, what Black Lives Matter means. Could you address that a little bit and just kind of give some background understanding as to what Black Lives Matter? And then also part two to that question is, when you hear someone else say it's not about Black Lives Matter, but it's all lives matter, how would you address that?
Yeah, good question. Quickly, I'll just use an illustration that I saw that someone else used to answer this question, so I don't take credit for this at all. But just imagine, if you would, a neighborhood of houses, and let's say one of the houses in that neighborhood were on fire. Logically speaking, the fire department would come. And when the fire department comes, their main method of operation will not be to go to each of the houses that are not burning and water hose those down, obviously, because they're not burning down. They would immediately go to the house that was on fire and bring all their resources together until that fire is extinguished. And in much the same way, when I hear, especially our white brothers and sisters say all lives matter, Black Lives Matter is not an attempt to say that Asian lives don't matter and white lives don't matter and Hispanic lives don't matter. But what we are trying to get them to understand is that white lives are not on fire. Black lives are on fire. And just like with a house, the idea would be that we would come together as a people to bring all of our resources together until that fire is fully extinguished. And so that would be my answer to that question. We're not trying to diminish anybody else's life, but let's put out the fire that's burning right now.
Great. And I think that was a great illustration of what that means. And Jasmine, I also want to bring you in on just what Pastor Drew stated. When people look at you and you talk about Black Lives Matter, speaking your own words, what does that mean? And what would you portray to others?
So first of all, Drew, you took my illustration. I was literally going to use the same exact thing. But personally, I'm okay being the angry Black woman, because sometimes people need to understand when I have to worry about my brother's lives, my father, any Black men that are my friends, when I have to worry about them not being able to walk, to run, to breathe, to just have a regular life without their skin color being a threat. That's when that's why their lives matter. I'm sorry if I'm being offensive, but when has white lives ever not mattered? When have they been threatened as in general? Black men and Black lives are just, we can't do so many things without just our skin color being a threat. And that's why we have to let people know that Black lives matter. And like Drew said, the other cultures and the other races are not on fire like ours. We can't do so many things without being taken out for no reason, being unarmed and being taken out. And that's why we have to let people know, you can say all lives matter, but Black lives matter, period.
Well said. I don't even have to say anything any further off of what you just said, because it matters. And everything that you just said is truly powerful and relevant to this. Guys, I want to kind of bring things and make a little change, just because I'm getting information even about the city of Columbus, that currently right now we not only have a curfew that's in effect at 10 o'clock, but according to news reports, that the city itself is going through a lot. The police have shut down various streets altogether and arresting people for those who are not authorized to even be in that vicinity. And I also understand that our councilwoman, Joyce Betty, who is a councilwoman for the city of Columbus, and I mean for Ohio, was pepper sprayed just now. So there's a lot of information that is coming out about the actual protests. And of course, we've seen what happened in Atlanta, the protest that is currently going on in Washington, D.C., what's happening in Minnesota. There's also, I mean, around the country, there are protests that are happening, some peaceful and some are less than peaceful. And so Max and Drew, I actually want to bring you both in on this particular question. There's a quote that comes directly from Dr. Martin Luther King that says, "A riot is the language of the unheard." And I'll say that again. A riot is the language of the unheard. And as of right now, many people are taking to the streets, and as I just stated, they're doing their own type of rioting and protesting in their own kind of way at this point. Because once before, and I've heard this actually in the last few nights, that we have tried as a culture, we have tried to be peaceful in our protests. And right now, we feel that the peaceful protest hasn't gotten us anywhere. And so now it's time to take it up a notch. And that's why you see what's happening in Atlanta, what's currently happening in Columbus, what happened at Target and various places in Minnesota and things of that nature. What are your thoughts to what Dr. King stated, and just your personal preference or personal opinion with regards to taking that peaceful protest and going up a notch in addressing the concerns of this nation?
Yeah, it actually reminds me of my daughter, my 2-year-old daughter. You know, when she's trying to get my attention, she'll start off with saying my name over and over again. If I'm watching TV or I'm distracted, then she'll start yelling my name. If I still don't give her the attention that she wants, she'll come over and start hitting my leg, right? And all of it is in an attempt to be heard, for me to hear her and for her to get my attention so I can do what she needs or wants me to do. And so I hear the quote and I resonate with it. No, I'm not saying that I agree with burning things down and burning buildings down, looting and all these kind of things like that. But I saw an interesting tweet the other day that said when we knelt down, like Colin Kaepernick, you had an issue with that. You wouldn't listen to that. You took issue with that. You mocked us and insulted us for that. And so then, you know, people are only going to take enough of being ignored before they go to as drastic measures as possible until you start listening. And for whatever the reason, I'm not saying it's right, but you listen when buildings are burned down. You start paying attention when cars are overturned. And so my prayer would be that when, like my daughter, when we're saying your name silently, that you would give your ear to us and listen to what we're saying so that it doesn't have to go to hitting your leg for you to get what we're saying.
No, yeah, I completely agree with everything Pastor Drew just said. And this is, to me, you know, obviously as pastors, we try to follow the leading of Jesus. And this is, to me, as person who speaks to me, man. So in Mark chapter 11, we see it in Mark, Matthew, and Luke, where these are the 3 gospels where they are registered, where Jesus is famously known for flipping the tables, right? Causing an uproar in the temple because they were, you know what I'm saying, cheating the people, selling to the people, you know what I'm saying, these different sacrificial items for more than what it was worth. And Jesus, man, is just flipping tables. And this is what Mark chapter 11, verse 18 says. The Bible says that, man, when the priests and the religious leaders saw what Jesus was doing, the Bible says that the religious leaders and the teachers of the law heard what Jesus had done. And at that moment, the Bible says they began to plan how to kill him at that moment. They didn't plan to kill Jesus when he healed the man with crippled legs. They didn't plan to kill Jesus when he healed the man who had no eyesight. At the moment when Jesus began to disrupt their system and the cash flow, and the moment Jesus decided to disrupt the way money was coming into their pockets, that's when they decided, okay, now he's a problem. See, he wasn't a problem when he was just giving food away. And he wasn't a problem when he was, you know what I'm saying, reaching the human trafficking girls. No. He became a problem when he started to agitate our system and our money. And to me, man, all the looting that's going on, again, I'm just gonna be honest. I'm on the river on the bank, because on one end, I believe in the peaceful protest, but at the same time, man, I believe that it is our responsibility that once we have knelt, and no, we're not gonna just shut up and dribble, and no, we're not just gonna keep on wearing "I can't breathe" shirts, but there's gonna be a moment where we are going to agitate the system, and we're going to hurt you where it hurts, and that is your dollar bills. And when we start agitating and aggravating and frustrating the system the way, man, the fact that Columbus just shut down, you know what I'm saying? We have agitated Columbus so much in just less than 24 hours that the police decided we need to shut down Columbus from 10 to 6 a.m. And that's in less than 24 hours. Imagine if we did this for the rest of the year and agitated it and y'all, they would have to change because at that point we would be hurting them where it hurts, and that's in their pocketbooks.
Very valid. I mean, and it's time for America to hear what is being asked. And so Josiah and Jasmine, and actually I want to bring in the president as well, President Cox. I want to ask this next question to you. We're getting a lot of questions for Facebook, and so we're going to bring these questions kind of together. There are a lot of angry people in general. There's just a lot of angry people. We've all stated here on our call today that we're angry, we're mad. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to have these emotions of what's happening to literally your brothers and sisters. You know, and so people are acting out that rage, and it's taking it to another level so that their voices can be heard. So I'm gonna ask this question to Josiah, and then to Jasmine, and then to President Cox. What do you want America to hear right now? If you had the opportunity, if you were protesting, if you were down there, you know, what would you want to hear America? What would you want America to hear at this time? What would you speak to them about?
Well, you know, the first thing is I want them to feel our frustration. I want them to know that we're speaking up because we've been unheard for so long, and that these injustices aren't correct, and that all we want to do is be treated the same as any man, any skin color. And I feel like the way to go about this is we need a protest with a point. We can't just be out here protesting aimlessly. Like in Columbus, a lot of the people were just breaking into things. They were stealing shoes. I'm talking people are on live holding clothes, running with it. I don't feel like that's the right way. Martin Luther King and them, when they walked from Selma to Montgomery, that didn't happen overnight. People didn't just post that on a flyer on their phone. You know, they sat down and they actually met and talked about, oh, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to move forward. So without strategic planning, there's no way for us to move forward. And I also look at Matthew 10:16 that says, you need to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. That's the way we need to go about these things. But yeah, I just feel like with our approach, we just need to really come together, sit down, because as of right now, even in Columbus, it's like, oh, I'm gonna post this ad on Instagram and hope people show up. Like, I think we need more of a structure, and that is when the older people come in, when our elders come in and set that leadership, and us young people bring that fire, bring our passion, bring our energy into it.
I totally agree. I think right now we just want to be heard, because even like Max said before, you know, we've knelt, we've worn shirts, we've done stuff, and it has kind of just been pushed to the side, like, okay, that's cute. But it's like, you know, when we want to throw the temper tantrum, when we want to riot, when we want to burn stuff, we want to destroy stuff, when we want to hurt their pockets, it may not be the best way to go about it, but guess what? We're being heard now. And yeah, we're angry about it. I'm not saying that I'm going to be out there burning buildings, but am I blaming them for doing it? No. No. I absolutely believe that we should be in solidarity with Minneapolis, with these other cases that happen across the country, because we weren't being heard. But now I think we're tipping the scales to be heard. And I think we can't let up, but I think, like Josiah said, we need to strategically plan how to pivot from this point. Because you know what? It's okay to be angry. We've said that. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to not be okay. But we need to use that and continue to strategically plan and think how we want to be heard. Because I think now we're getting heads turned. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Very true. President Cox, how would you address this current circumstance and the angry individuals that are not only around us, but in our conference, in our churches?
Okay, so a couple of things. One is um, you're angry, I'm angry, okay? And the question is, can we focus that angriness in a productive manner? The challenge that I have is all too often the anger and the frustration and the rioting happens in our community. We tear down ourselves. I mean, we want to burn things, and it's within our community that does not help us out in the long run. I was talking to my daughter earlier today, and I shared with her an experience that I had. I was 5 years old. My father took me to Mardi Gras in New Orleans. He worked as a chef at Pontchartrain Hotel, and he decided that he would take me to Mardi Gras, but he wanted not to be in such a rowdy area. So we were on St. Charles Street, and they had ropes that stopped us from crossing the street. The float comes by, guys throwing out beads and doubloons. A doubloon rolls right at my feet. There's a policeman standing to my left, and I reach out. I drop to my knees, reach out and grab the doubloon. The policeman stepped on my hand and basically was saying, "Let it go." And I let it go, and I looked up at my father. My father had this look on his face. And like I said, I was 5. I really didn't understand. And time goes by. I'm now 15 years old. And my father and I are having a discussion, and it just comes out, "Why didn't you do anything?" And tears began to roll down his cheeks. And he said, "Son, I asked myself that question over and over again. What stopped me from hitting that man? But if I had hit him, I probably wouldn't be here today." There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of anger that is pent up within individuals. And, unless we can find a way that really gets their attention, you know what got their attention? When Barack Obama was made president of the United States. In spite of all of the individuals, Trump's basic coalition right now would never have wanted that. But we hit them where it hurt.
That's right.
All right, by voting. The reason why Trump is president today is because we didn't come together and vote. You may say, well, Clinton was not a good choice, but was she the lesser of two evils? Okay. And I'm not telling people who to vote for. I'm just simply saying that whatever we do in terms of our frustration, it's like you getting mad at home and punching holes in the walls. What good does that do? Okay. You getting upset and you kick the dog. What good does that do? Unless what you are going to do is actually going to bring about change. You've got to find a creative and a positive way to bring about change. So what did Martin Luther King and that coalition do? They decided that they weren't going to get on buses because that's the financial impact that it could have in Baton Rouge. They decided that they weren't going to frequent certain stores. When Kaepernick took a knee and the idea came up, well, let's stop looking at football on Sunday. Let's have an impact upon how our dollars are actually being spent.
Right.
Well, that would have made a difference, except we weren't willing to give up football on Sunday. And so the opportunity was there, but we couldn't come together enough to say, this is what we're going to do as a collective group. I would say to you that what would hurt more than anything else right now, they're not going to let you go down Wall Street and live. But what they cannot stop you from doing is voting and finding candidates and supporting candidates that are sympathetic and empathetic to our needs, that will seek to reverse some of the changes that has taken place under this president. President Trump made the statement, what do you have to lose? Well, now there's 40 million people who don't have health care that had it before. What is it that you have to lose? Now it's always been bad, but it was undercover. Now it's out in the open in reference to you doing whatever you want to do to people of color. If we want to do anything, let's come together, talk about it, and go to the polls and vote. All right. That's how change takes place within this country. Other than that, you can get out there with your Molly cocktails and your guns, and the government has more guns than you do.
Well spoken, well stated, President, because there is a lot that we can do. And I know we have talked about going out to vote and to make an impactful difference, not only in the actual presidential election, but in the off years when we're voting our Senate and in our House and things of that nature. We have to be present. We have to go out and fight through all of the stuff that, you know, they do their best to try to make it hard for us to go out and vote, but we don't help ourselves by actually participating in voting and doing what we can. I remember you would see scenes when the Obama election was going on, the first one was going on, where, I mean, people were picking up people, helping the elderly, helping those who could not get out to vote. They were doing all kinds of things to make sure that people who had the opportunity to vote, and unfortunately there are a lot that society has allowed to not allow certain people to vote. But those who have the power to vote, we have to get out and vote by any means necessary. However we can do it, we have to make a difference. And President Cox, you stated that. And I think, and that brings us to another point. And I want to bring you back and bring Pastor Ridley in on this. As the director of young people in our conference, you know, there are a lot of things that we can do, not only as a church, but as a conference. There's a lot of organized protests and organized things that are taking place that we can be a part of. For example, I believe it's July 7th, I believe it is, where they're calling for Blackout Day. You stated, Elder Cox, about, you know, the black not going watching NFL games and things of that nature. What would you guys say to that? How can we be a part of or partner with these organizations who are looking to make effective change? Voting is a part of it, but some other things that would hit the economy where it hurts. We see that with the pandemic and why they're trying to open up these states and things like that, because it's affecting the economy. We have a huge part to play in that. What would you guys say to our young people, to our church members, our constituents, to play an active role in some of these organized events that are being called for and participating in?
Well, I guess I'll speak first. So, I mean, I think it's vitally important. And I would say that for us to really make any change, we have to be present. We have to be in the moment. I think one of the first things that we have to do is really begin to re-educate our churches, our congregations, of the value of this work. Because here's one of the things that I learned in my last pastorate is that once I made the conscious commitment that I wanted to be involved in these different initiatives and things that will really benefit my community, I really didn't even have to go out of my way to really get involved, because organizations, they began to seek me out, and they saw me visible and being there. So it first starts with making that just commitment that you're going to do it, that you're going to be involved, that you're going to be present, but to really bring your congregation along, and those in the community. It really starts with just that re-education. You know, one of the challenges, things that has held us back as Adventists, is just our simple belief in the fact and knowledge and the hope that we have in the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so we believe that, and I believe it's certain and it's going to happen. But you know, I've also met pastors who are retired now who have told me that, man, they believed in their day that Jesus Christ was coming back then. And so, but he hasn't. And we don't know. We know he's coming one day, but we don't know when that's going to happen. But what has happened is transpired as it has made it easier for us to not really want to be involved in the social issues and injustices in the current day, because, you know, we're just holding out for the hope that we know it's going to get better one day because Jesus is coming back. And what you have right now, though, is our community, man, we're like limping. We're just limping, almost like limping to the finish line, holding out that hope. And don't get me wrong, he's definitely coming. We just don't know when he's going to come. And that's why the Bible says we have to occupy until he comes. And so once we begin to educate our people about the importance of, yes, the Lord is coming back again. And yes, ultimately, that's when things are really going to be perfected. But even with that, yet there is a work that we can and need to be doing right now, which, brothers and sisters, not only will it help us just from a social standpoint, but even from an evangelistic standpoint. That's a whole nother conversation. But, you know, it is the fact that we have not been as consistently involved in our community in addressing the issues of people that look just like us. It has impacted us in a sense in really being to connect with African Americans, people that look like us, and really connecting them with the gospel, because we're not speaking to the social ills and issues that they are facing currently right now. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Let me say something very quickly here. There was a shift in our church in the mid-70s. There was a focus of Seventh-day Adventists not interacting with other Bible-believing groups. And so we were kind of standoffish. We had some individuals within ministry that were connecting with other groups. Pastors were part of ministerial alliances. Generally, it was non-denominational alliances. When we started the Evangelism Council, E.E. Cleveland started that. And because E.E. was who he was able to bring a level of acceptability in terms of bringing first day preachers to our church. Now, here is the thing. We have the everlasting gospel. We have a message that we are to share. And the question is, how do you share messages with others if you're not their friends? You know, Jesus' model of evangelism was simply this: mingle with the people, identify their needs, seek to meet those needs, then bid them follow him. That started a new ideology in the 80s, where pastors were encouraged to get more involved within their communities. And in many instances, it wasn't the pastors that were not interested. It was congregations that had been taught over a period of time not to mingle. We started, when I say we, I'm talking about my brother James and Pastor Grider. We started a preach out that actually lasted over 30 years consistently, where each year, wherever we were, we would have an opportunity for fellowship with first day pastors, and of course our churches also. It opened the door for us to be able to share the gospel. And when you're out there in the community, needs are going to present itself, and God and the Holy Spirit will help provide the resources and the opportunities to meet those needs, so that when truth is shared, it's not shared from a stranger, but it's shared from a friend, and individuals are more likely to receive that. Last statement I would make on that is the facts, statistics say the longer you are a Seventh-day Adventist, the fewer non-Adventist friends we have. We have to become intentional in meeting others and befriending others. That's ministry beyond the walls, and it will enable us to be looked at differently in our community. Not as if we know it all, we are better than other people, but we serve God, and God has given us a message that individuals are willing to share and receive.
Very good point. Very good point. And I think it's very important. And as we transition to some of our discussion, it's very important for us to discuss what can we do and how we can start making action, being more or less just talking about it, but making action. And so I want to bring in Pastor Drew, Carla, Pastor Coaxum, if you guys can come in on this next question. There's a few things that I want to transition to, and you guys can speak to whichever part of it you want to, but I think it's high time for us as a church, as a collective body, to start taking action and what we're going to do next. What is the next step? We're seeing what's happening all around us. We've given our personal feelings. We've expressed how we emotionally feel about what's happening. So now we have to say, what are we going to do as a church? And let me preface this a little bit. And actually, Pastor Drew, you can speak on this a little bit. Some years ago, what happened in Charlottesville? We talked about how, the conference was very present at what happened in Charlottesville. We actually had the Potomac Conference came with us and partnered together and made protests and, went to the streets and talked to the members at the schools and everyone. We worked together as a group, but that was 3 years ago. We have to continue 3 or 4 years ago now. We have to continue that process, and we have to continue to say, what are we going to do next? Because this is not something that we can continue to just do one thing and then wait years later. We have to continue to make progress. So my question to to all three of you guys are a few things. Is number one, what do you think as a church group we need to do next? What are our next steps? How can we all work together? The second question, a part of that is, it's one thing for us as Blacks to do what we need to do together and come together and just make our voices heard. But we need to incorporate more than just Blacks. We hear our Caucasian counterparts talk about how, yes, this is injustice. We don't agree. How can we bring them along and help them understand us? How can we allow them to see that Black lives do matter? And why do they matter? And why are we relevant and important to society? So if you have the opportunity to also speak to them, what are some of the things that you would share with them? So again, I know I've asked a two-part question, but I will jump into you, Pastor Drew, if you can talk about that, definitely talk about what took place in Charlottesville and just kind of fast forward and bring it to where we are today.
Sure. Before I turn it over to the other two words that I would use in terms of plans going forward would be education and collaboration. I'm hoping that because of things like this panel discussion, the hurdle that many of us as pastors and leaders have found in our churches is that we have to fight to get our members on board with the importance of social justice and being involved in that. And I'm praying and I'm hoping that because of different discussions like this, that's no longer going to be a hurdle that we see necessary to have to fight. And so it's educating ourselves on what's going on. A lot of us are just ignorant concerning what's happening. And I don't think with the social media, the news outlets and everything, it's no excuse for us not to be aware at the very least of what's happening. So education first, but then collaboration. And much like Jermaine said in 2016 or 17 rather, when the KKK and white supremacists came and marched and rioted in Charlottesville, Virginia, where we were living and doing ministry, our church was able to collaborate with one of the other state churches in the area there, and we were able to do that for one reason. It didn't take magic. We didn't pay them. We just asked them, could we get together? And you'd be amazed at what could happen when you just reach out and ask people to get involved. And over the course of us working together, we found out that even though our churches were less than a mile away from each other, that was the first time in 40 years our churches came together to do anything. And so hopefully we'll see the necessity of collaboration and asking, reaching out and saying, hey, let's do this. All we did was come together and we peacefully marched from our church to their church and, chanted and sang songs. And then we did a prayer vigil downtown. And it was a beautiful day. And all it took was reaching out, making one phone call and saying, this is important. Can we do this together?
Okay. You want me to go next, John? You can finish it up. Okay. So I'm agreeing with Drew completely. My two things would be educate and speak up. Real quick, I can remember we moved from New York to Ohio, which that was like a culture shock for me. And it was between my sophomore and junior year of high school because I was a military brat. So we would move. I went through my junior and senior year of high school being called a nigger every single day. There were two guys in particular that made sure, in case any of the other people missed it, that they called me that every day. And I kept that within myself. I never told my parents. I never told anybody, because as somebody Black, you're taught you don't complain, you don't speak up, you just deal with it. I learned two things from that. One was that I'm strong, and two is that I need to speak up. I just shared that story with my mom 2 years ago, and she said to me, Carla, I wish you had told me back then, because the military paid that school huge sums of money for us to be there. And if they had told me, it would have been, if I had told, it would have been nipped in the bud. When I share that story with white people, they are always appalled. They can't, well, they're uncomfortable when I say the word nigger anyhow. But they are appalled. They can't believe something like that happened. And I realize part of the problem is we have not educated them and we have not shared with them. And that's partly our fault. I've had the opportunity to teach a discrimination and stereotypes class for a professional development day for the school system I work in, which was huge because it's a white school system predominantly. And it was awesome. I've done some since then, but the one that really sticks out the most is 2 months ago, I was asked to speak to a group of Quakers. I didn't even know the Quakers were still around. And I got to speak to them because they wanted to know, their question was, what is it like being Black in America? And I was nervous about coming in and doing it, but I did it. And my daughters and a couple of their friends from the church came and supported. And let me tell you, having those young people there and saying what they're going through now, I was my mother. I did not know some of the things my daughters have dealt with in the school system. But I go into these trainings being very honest. We have a tendency to be scared to be honest because we're afraid of offending people. And I don't mean that I was rude, but I straight up told them, look, this is what we deal with on an everyday basis. And I realized that a lot of white people are completely clueless as to what is really going on. Those that are willing to listen will listen. Those that don't, you're not going to get through to them anyhow. The sad part is the people that I feel have the hardest time listening to it are Christians, because they don't want to face that ugliness. But if we don't get to a point where we can openly talk with each other, nothing is ever going to be solved. We're never going to work together. Part of the reason so many whites got involved in the civil rights movement is because they began to see the filming of the freedom riders being pulled off of buses and beat down. They began to see it. So they didn't really have a knowledge of what we were going through or of what it felt like until somebody brought it to their forefront. And I think we've been trained so much to be politically correct, to not offend, that we have not enlightened and educated our white brothers and sisters. The final thing I want to say is, when all this went down, I posted openly on my Facebook because I put what I'm feeling. I had plenty of white teachers reach out to me that I work with saying, what can I do? I had one say, look, I need to educate myself more. I'm trying to raise my children correctly, but what books do you know? So I gave her a list of books. I had another one, I gave her a list of books to use with her children. Then my daughter said, have them read The Hate You Give. So somehow between yesterday and today, I now have a 20-person book club, and we're going to be reading The Hate You Give together. Why? Because they're educators, because that book is blatant in your face, and because I think it'll open dialogue on both parts. So I have to honestly say the biggest key is for us to be able to talk, and more importantly, for people to be able to listen, because we don't.
Yeah, I agree with both, and I'll do my best to try to be brief. I think it does begin with a conversation. We have to open the lines of communications with our brothers and sisters, and try to talk to each other and understand where each other is coming from. But I do want to say a couple of things. I mean, first, I'd like to speak to our Caucasian Christian friends, right? And the first thing I want them to understand is that Eurocentric worship is not the standard, and it should not be the standard in our churches, right? And I say that because, man, it stifles our creativity as Black people. It reinforces negative stereotypes about us when our music and our worship style cannot and will not be incorporated into the worship style, and also breaks down the lines of communication between us. Because if you won't even accept the way we play the drums or sing music, then how can we ever have a conversation about even more complicated issues, like someone being killed in the streets by white police officers or Black men being killed who are unarmed? Secondly, I think we need less allies and we need more accomplices. All right. This is not my statement, but I agree with it wholeheartedly. We need less allies and we need more accomplices. We have a lot of our Caucasian friends and brothers and sisters, and I love them to death, and they're all my brothers and sisters in Christ. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of them who will say, I stand with you, and they will post something on their Facebook page or on their Instagram page. And we certainly appreciate that, and we understand that, and we receive that. And thank you so much. But we need people to also get into the trenches with us. We need people at the protest rallies, as they were in the civil rights movement as well. We need people to vote for us and not only for themselves and their interests, because the word of God even says, Proverbs 31:8-9, that we should open up our mouths and speak for those who are needy and who are oppressed and who are poor. We need them. And then thirdly, I'll just say this, and hopefully I can leave it here. But man, like I am upset and I guess very angry by the fact that we have more of our Caucasian brothers and sisters who are upset at the looting than the loss of somebody's life. Now, I understand you can say whatever you want, and listen, I'm not encouraging looting or damaging property or anything like that, but you're not going to get me to equate the loss of a life to the loss of property. And this is one thing that we're seeing time and time again with these protests, that America values property more than somebody's life. George Floyd is dead now. An entire generation has been affected. A family has been affected. People have been affected. He is not coming back to this earth short of the return of Jesus Christ. That's a real issue and a real problem. And so we don't need our Caucasian brothers and sisters, and anybody for that matter, because I don't want to keep any pressure on them, but anybody for that matter to equate the loss of life to looting. They're just not the same thing. I would much rather lose property than lose a life. So these are things that are on my heart and mind. And all of that begins with a serious, real, honest, and transparent conversation that hopefully our Caucasian brothers and sisters, and we are too, are willing to have with one another.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, man, as we talk about having real serious conversations with whites and blacks and Asians and Hispanics and all different ethnicities, man, I believe this is something that we can do across every city. So here specifically in the city of Columbus, right? Just to read you all a quick post, the Columbus Community Safety Advisory Commission recommended last year in 2019 a creation of an independent civilian review board to go over citizen complaints as well as other changes to improve the Columbus Division of Police. This recommendation will be sent to Mayor Andrew J. It has already been sent. This is what we can do. We need in every city a community police review board where we can police the police, where we can say, you know what, this officer I do not approve, and this is why, and this is my complaint, and this is why, because we need to keep the police and the authority accountable. So all the whites, all the blacks, all the Latinos, all the Asians, we all need to come together. Specifically, I'm talking about Columbus now specifically. In your city, I suggest that if you don't have it, push for it. Here in Columbus, we have got to push for this so that we can begin to police the police, where we can keep them accountable and keep them in check when they are wrong.
Very true, very true, and thank you for bringing that point out. That there are cities that actually have these type of committees. You know, for those who are on Facebook, on YouTube, that are visiting from all over the United States, please take the time to Google and to look to see what kind of committees and groups and organizations there are that you can either be a part of or to hold accountable, and make sure that there are oversight committees that are policing the police and that are oversight of what's happening in the communities and things like that. And actually, you know, your local church can be involved, and you as an individual can be involved. And we want you to take the opportunity to actually not only talk about it, but be about it, be about the process. And one of the things that we've shared here multiple times is how we can be present, how we can be involved in the community, and how can we be about positive change. These are all ways that you can take the opportunity to be about it, to participate in, to make positive change, and having the conversations with your peers, having the conversation with elected officials. They have the direct obligation to listen to you, to send letters to not only to the White House, but to the state, to the House. All of these individuals and entities have the direct obligation to listen to you. So we all need to take the time to be a part of the process, not only going into the actual cities to riot or to do peaceful protests, but to do other constructive things as far as sending letters or to look at the various organizations and things of that nature that are taking place that allows us to be about effective change. So thank you all for providing that information, Max, and all of the things that were stated as well said. Our time has fleeted. Unfortunately, this has been a very, very good discussion. One that I think that we should continue. And this is something that we would have to go back and take a look and see if it is possible for us to continue this kind of discussion. We're looking at Facebook and we see we're hearing you. We're hearing that this is something that you would like to see that happen more often. So we would definitely take that into consideration and see what we can do. So stay tuned to to Allegheny West Facebook page and to our YouTube channel and to Instagram to see if we will continue to provide these kind of discussions at great length. So unfortunately, our time has fleeted. So I want to take this last question. I want to bring in Jasmine. I want to bring in Josiah, also Pastor Ridley, and to our President Cox. If you all can join me in this last question, and I will start with you, Jasmine, and then Josiah, then Pastor Ridley, and then Pastor Cox for the final thought. You have the platform now. You have the opportunity to speak to your peers, to your church members, to your, whoever, co-workers, whatever they may be. You have the opportunity. What is the one thing that you would say to them during this time, whether it's an encouraging word, whether it's what they can do? whatever it may be, I want you to have that opportunity right now to say your final thoughts along with what's taking place right now.
So I think, like you said before, we need to keep the conversation going. We need to continue to talk, because the next step in talking is planning. And we want to plan with the younger people. We want to plan with the older people. We want to bridge together, especially in the church. We want the church to implement more social justice, so that way the church can be more part of the community, because this is happening around us no matter what. So the next phase is planning and coming up with a strategic plan, because I feel like we are on the cusp of having effective change. And I think that it's possible. It's within our grasp right now, and we have to act on it. So we have to keep this conversation going, and the next step is planning.
Yeah, Jasmine hit it head on. I just think that, like I said before, we just really need to just come together and focus on a solution. Everybody's angry. Everybody wants justice, but all that talk would be so cheap if we're not planning, if we're not coming up with a plan that is going to bring good execution and justice to these situations. So I just want to say that whatever's going on in the church, I will personally make it my duty. As far as the youth go, any plans the church has, you can contact me. I'll get the youth involved, church and non-church. So I really think we should push it and get out that positive message.
Yes, so man, what one thing that I could say, man, there's so much that I feel like I could say right now is the final word, but I do just want to just say just two things very quickly. And this is especially first to my youth, my young people, just everyone out there, that I just want you to know that however you feel, whether it's sadness, pain, hurt, even anger, I just want you to know that your feelings are valid. And you don't have to be ashamed of how you feel. You don't have to feel bad or feel as if it's wrong to feel the way you feel. But your feelings are valid, and even the anger. The Bible even speaks of being angry, but just not sinning. And so your feelings are valid, but I would encourage you to take whatever it is, how you feel, and use it as motivation to really get involved, to really try to make an impact, to really help encourage others where you are in your context right now. The other thing I would say is, please, everyone out there who's watching and listening in, and Pastor Cox had mentioned it a little bit earlier, talked about the importance of voting. Please, if you don't understand anything else, just know that when we talk about how important voting is, just understand and realize that there's nothing that happens in your town, in your city, in your state, in your neighborhood, in your community that happens that's not directly tied to a vote somewhere or a decision that is made somewhere by someone who was elected to a position. That's could be simply where the highways, when it gets fixed, or the roads in your community. It could be where the park is built. It could be what kind of grocery store is built in your neighborhood. Sometimes we always look at it for just with the big things that take place and big decisions that are made. But no, even small, even the simple things, there's nothing that takes place that's not directly impacted by a vote or by someone placed in a position to make a decision on something who was voted into that position. And understanding that, please exercise your right. Please get out there and vote.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to each of the panel members for sharing your ideas. I want you to know that you have been heard. And I want to thank Jermaine for helping to facilitate this process. I want to say to everyone who is listening, this is your church. I wish I could look you directly in the eye and say, listen, this is your church. We have implemented within our administration a process where what you have to say, we give listening ear to it. We have prioritized getting our youth more involved. And so we've asked Pastor Drew to come and be a participant on our executive committee. You need to know that Pastor Drew has a counterpart in all of the other 8 regional conferences and the West Coast churches. One of the things that we say to individuals, if you want to know how your church works, if you want to know what influence you have, we generally have 6 executive committee meetings a year. The executive committee has final authority in between constituencies that happens once every 4 years. You can come and have voice at any of our executive committees. It's just a matter of you calling my office and we will put you down as an official invitee, which means that you can come to the executive committee, you can hear what is being discussed, you can make comments about it, you can give ideas. While you don't have a vote, you do have a voice. And that's important to us, that you get involved. Individuals that say, I don't know what's going on in the conference, it's only because you've not put forth the effort to come and participate. Our doors are open. We believe that you are the church right now, young people, and we value you. We want to encourage you to stay tuned. We will certainly do a debriefing in reference to this time that we've had together. We will also plan for future opportunities for us to talk through these critical issues. And as Jasmine said, the next step is planning. In other words, getting a plan in place in reference to what we can put before the people as a defined strategy in terms of us going forward. So God bless you. Thank you for tuning in, and I will turn it back over to our host, Jermaine Jackson.
Thank you, President Cox. Very well stated. And again, thank you to each of our panelists for taking the time out today to talk about some serious issues that we are faced with in the nation. Sometimes it is not easy to speak on these things, but you all have done an amazing job. And I know that many questions have been answered, concerns have been met, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And hopefully to our viewers, you see that we are serious. You see that we are a conference who is looking to make real change and to do what we can to be a part of the solution the best way possible. We do not want to be a church that is just a church on a street corner, just being in our own building. But as President Cox stated, we want to be a church, a conference that are going beyond the walls to make a difference. And so all I ask is that you continue to stay tuned to our Facebook page, to our Instagram page, and check for any updates to our website, check for updates. We will get back. We will plan, we will look to see what we can do to make a real difference in the Allegheny West Conference. And not only in this conference, but whatever we can do in our nation. God has commissioned us to be about great service, to help our brothers and sisters. And it doesn't mean just people in the church, it's individuals from all over, to be a partner with them. He has commissioned us to do, and we are accepting that call. So again, thank you for taking the opportunity to be with us today. We have definitely gone over time, but I think it was a great opportunity to have a real discussion. So stay tuned for future discussions. Stay tuned for any other updates that we will provide and answers that we can give. Please feel free to drop us any notes that you may have to Facebook and to our Instagram. If there are any other questions or any other suggestions that you guys have, we will be listening. We will be watching to see and hear what you are saying and to what we can do. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you again to our panelists. We are continue to pray for this nation. We pray for the victims, families who have lost the loved ones. It's unfortunate that they have lost these loved ones in order for America to wake up. But we are praying that their deaths will not be in vain, that their deaths will be heard and change will come. So it is our prayer, our earnest and sincerest prayer, that God will make a way. And we believe that he will be the difference maker in all of this. And we too can be a part of this. So thank you again for joining us. And please stay tuned. May God bless you and keep you. And may God bless this beautiful country.